Hi, everybody, and welcome to Metaphysical Insights. I'm William Becker, your host, and I am thrilled today. I have Reverend Dr. David Parry as my guest. Um, David's a fantastic, fascinating human being. Um, I'm going to post his, whoops, that's not the right button. Okay, I'm off to a really great start here. I'm going to post his um, his bio here in the chat for you to read it, but I'd like to get a little bit of an advance from the man himself on it. David, thank you so much for being here. Um, I can't. I'm just excited.
William, as I say, my apologies again for having a frog in my throat, and my apologies to the viewers. If I'm going to start choking, I'm going to start choking. I've got my bottle of water, so forgive me, everybody. I'm just a short, fat, half Welsh guy. I never know where to start. I mean, for me, I'm doing one thing in lots of
Right.
different ways.
Hmm.
I'm a priest. I'm a pastor sort of priest. In other words, because priests have different types of calling within the calling. I
Hmm.
prefer pastoring because I like talking to people. I'm a people person. So for me, it's just one thing that expresses itself in a few ways. Other people seem to find it some sort of weird tapestry that's been woven together with metaphysical needles. Maybe, I don't know. Um, I'm also a playwright, which I'm very proud of, a poet. In England, that's not really that unusual if you look at our history. Particularly if you're looking at high church, excuse me, the high church side of things, there have been lots of priests who are also involved with poetry, literature, and theatre. I act sometimes, which I don't mind doing, but it's not really, it's not what floats my boat. I've directed, I've produced. I prefer actually producing pieces of work, and maybe we can talk about my new play a bit later.
Oh, I'd like to.
Because I'd be deeply honoured. I mean, I'm coming up to my second doctorate, believe it or not, to do with theology, morals, and that sort of stuff. I'm also uh, solidifying my qualifications as a counsellor. I was involved with Young Club London for years. I think I'm going in a different direction to that at the moment. Gosh, what else? I've got a fascination with anomalous phenomena, otherwise known as occultism, UFOs, excuse me, and such like. I've not made a career out of it. I've got a career. I don't need another one. I've got a career.
Yeah.
What's the beauty for me? My husband, my beautiful partner, he was the sane one in this relationship. He keeps me going. And my congregation. I'm so deeply blessed by the friends that we've got, by the contacts that we've got. A vocation is one of the greatest blessings in the world. Never let anyone tell you any different, provided it's working. Now, we said a bit of that off air, and I'm looking forward to unveiling that a bit more. If it's working, I don't think anyone can doubt that providence is at work, that the angels are glittering somewhere. My trouble and your trouble is that it goes wrong so often, and the church as an institution, there isn't one capital C, is there, church? It's all the way from Russian Orthodoxy and the great beauty of Russian Orthodoxy, all the way through Greek Orthodoxy, Roman Catholics, non-Roman Catholics, Anglicans, all the way down, Methodists, Unitarians, Quakers. I mean, that the whole of it's Christianity. What does it have in common? Very little and everything at the same
Right.
time. So we've
Exactly.
got to remember there are lots of examples of where it does work, and sadly, there are far too many examples where it doesn't. My perspective will normally be: are you in the right type of church body? Um, you know, is that? I mean, I've got a person who has remained nameless at the moment, who's Orthodox and keeps contacting me through social media. who is saying loads of Protestant things. The young guy doesn't realise that, and I actually said to him the other day, you're having so many problems with orthodoxy. Have you ever considered a Protestant church? You look and sound like a Protestant. It would be
Yeah.
no disrespect to them. What your priests are interested in is you finding the path forward, the path to glory. What they, unless they're very narrow-minded people indeed.
Right.
I think this great, Christendom, whatever it means, this great fortress, this huge battleship, this amazing ark of salvation sailing through the seas of history. And from my view, trying to drag everyone on board hook, line, and sinker so they can find themselves, have a good life. And, for me, it's just a huge, positive, sparkling, wonderful energy thing. And I'd recommend it to everyone. If you've not found that connection, it's there somewhere. What else do I say, William? Oh my God, I never know. I never know. I never know what to say with questions like that.
Oh, I know. And um, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. I think it's fascinating. I also, from my own experience, think that there are so many different religions that you can also find that path
Yeah.
and the work in. I see religion as an institution, as something of a tool. It can be used for good, and it can be used for things less good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have examples of that in every religion that we have any real knowledge of,
Yeah.
going back to the Bronze Age,
Yes.
at least.
Yeah.
And so um, that's part of how I put the pieces together. But it's so encouraging for me to hear you talk about your experiences in the pieces. And I agree with you. But it helps people, um, I think, to realize that. And religion, religion as a whole has taken such a beating
Yeah.
for a long time, and parts of it deservedly,
Oh.
but not just Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism. I mean, just because of all the way it's people have acted in that name
Yeah.
to for power, wealth, um, has nothing to do with religion. It's disguised that way, but it's power, greed,
Yeah.
control,
Yeah.
taking over of land,
Yeah.
um, and fear of the other.
Yeah.
But I think, um, okay, now we jump around a lot, and excuse me, bear with me, but it's my ADHD brain gets a little worse with age, and um, even
You're
though
a
I
titan, William. You're a titan.
thank you, but I'd like to know more about what the old Catholic Church is, and then maybe you could move that into the spirituality, but then also how that kind of fits in with paranormal. And I was listening or watching your piece on UFOs, um, and that's exciting because we had a similar experience, a little different, but um, maybe because I think these things are all related. And yes, that thing flying is a machine, not
Yeah.
a spiritual.
Yeah.
But all of these things seem to affect and put together the spirit, work with the spirituality of the human.
Yeah. Gosh. Right. I think we're going to be here for the next 15 hours at that rate.
Okay,
Um,
sorry.
Look, I've been looking forward to speaking with you. I know a tiny bit about you, but hi, my friend. I know a tiny bit about you. I've been looking forward to this show. I've been looking forward to speaking to you personally. As I say, we'll keep in touch. That's just already
Right.
agreed. So, this is a fine opportunity and an honor for me. But people have to remember it's late in the evening in the UK, and I've just been running around all day and wolfed down my supper. So everyone's in different time zones and different mental spaces. So just bear with me, everyone.
Yeah.
Old Catholicism. I thought I was in the right church loads of times. My family background, my stepfather was Roman Catholic, my mother was Anglican. So, in other words, nobody ever went to church and nobody took religion seriously. I have been in a clerical position for most of my life in various ways.
Okay.
Because I'm one of these sort of diehard libtards, I'm proud of it.
Good
You
for
know,
you.
I was actually with the Unitarian Church for many, many years. My trouble with free church isn't that the people are half asleep. There's a joke going around at the minute, they're all comatose. They're not, they're just really sweet people. My trouble with sweet people, this sounds awful and cynical, I'm sorry, is that nothing ever gets decided. So, 5 years later, you're still talking about the same issue. Come on.
Right.
So I was with them for years. I have not a single bad word against Unitarians. They are my brothers and sisters. We didn't always see eye to eye, but yeah, that's life, and they're beautiful, beautiful people. I was also with Metropolitan Community Church for a number of years, which of course is, for want of a much better description, the gay church that started in America during the civil rights upheavals,
Right.
that wonderful part of American history where conscience really kicked in.
Mhm.
Wow. I mean, there's hardly anything like that across the planet. Uh, that was a time of revolution and good-heartedness and thinking outside the box, an incredible time. And that spirit needs to return. People are rebelling
Yes.
nowadays for the sake of rebelling, not because there are things to rebel against. My God, there are things to rebel against, but not the same things. I mean, a lot has actually been achieved. So I've had lay positions, senior lay positions. A lay minister with those two particular churches, working my way forward and asking myself, is this really where I'm meant to be? Because I'm going to say something really weird to everybody. Sorry, I'm a Protestant at heart, but I'm a sacramentalist.
Okay.
So that is a very difficult marriage.
Yes, it would be.
Know, you get baptized, then what? I mean, in most Protestant churches, that's the end of the deal. I'm sorry, that's the beginning of a process. So,
Right.
I've never been able to. The angels, in their wisdom, never really wanted me to settle that one. I got involved with Christian Gnosticism. I was actually made a tour, a Valentinian bishop in a monastery in Italy many years ago, which started. I mean, that what did that mean? It started the circle going back into familiar territory.
Okay.
For a number of years, I was with the Holy See of Antioch, which is purely Old Catholic Church. I promise we're getting there, William. I'm now honoured to be a Monsignor. I call myself Reverend, Monsignor, Master. Oh gosh, no, that's not me. So I call myself Reverend with the Old Catholic Apostolic Church, which fits me like a hand in a glove, which I can't believe. I'm still ruffling, and my feathers are ruffled by arguments that don't take place within the Old Catholic Apostolic Church. So the angels have done it. They delivered. They delivered on their promise. You've ended up where you're meant to be, and I still have all of the theological problems. And is it one God in three, or is it the other way around? I've still got all of those problems, but
Uh-huh.
I'm in the right place to talk about it, think about it. I'm openly gay, and my partner and I are well received in the church. They're beautiful people. They use the phrase ancient in faith, but I think it's modern in vision, modern in outlook, which is true. We see Catholicism, as the early church did, universal.
Right.
You have a place and a home with us if you feel that is where Providence is leading you. Um, Old Catholicism, as I understand it, now you've got to remember, I'm not a historian.
Mm.
And these things get immensely complicated very quickly, depending on who you're reading, who you're listening to, who you're interviewing, what the documents are saying, what you think the documents are saying. So,
Right.
it fragments rapidly. I mean, Old Catholicism mainly, even this is contentious, mainly started a couple of centuries ago. I'm afraid the date, whether people like it or not, does vary. A group of Roman Catholics got together because, any big organization, portents of the future. Ideas that people start talking about that are going to get on an agenda somewhere.
Right.
So my Dutch colleagues were way ahead of the game, and they knew things like papal infallibility was on the cards. Gets up the nose of libtards, that sort of thing. Gets up the nose of libtards. No man can speak with the voice of God. Sorry. And they didn't like the assumption, which of course this is a long time before it was actually declared, of the Blessed Virgin body and soul into heaven. I actually quite like that one. But so in other words, what was it all about? A lot of Dutch Roman Catholics got together and said, well, we're not happy at these increasing levels of hierarchy. What are they for? We want more accountability. We want to, even if you take the Platonic view that the Roman Church is mirroring the hierarchies in the supernal realms, which is very hard to justify. But
Mhm.
if we benefit where it's due, if you do take that as an explanation, are they living up to it? And does that really mean we need a reinforced feudal system in a world like ours, taking a faith like ours out to people? So
Right.
a load of people in Holland said no, 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 no. They signed a declaration in Utrecht saying, I'm sorry, we with love and healing and kisses to all of you, we can't go down that route. We're sorry. Um, Human beings, what they are, the original signatories, any big organization very soon splinters into smaller organizations, and then it depends, who wants to work together and who doesn't.
Right.
And my particular old Catholic stream is from the Utrecht line, which I'm very happy about. But we've gone down an increasingly liberal route. I mean, there are liberals within the Roman communion, by which is meant people that want a progressive and modernist view of ethical and political issues. It
Right.
does not mean much more than that. When I say LCC, Liberal Catholic Church, I tend to mean people that pioneered things like religious studies, for a start, that pioneered interreligious dialogue from late Victorian times, early Edwardian times onwards. That started mainly in this part of the world through the vehicle of the Theosophical Society, who, of course, was introducing things like Hindu theology. I mean, it
Right.
was a bit late, it had been done before that, but they were bringing over incredible tracts that had never been translated before, new ideas, new customs. They started embracing what they felt was Buddhism.
Mhm.
They didn't seem to realize, probably because of the time frame, it's a lot earlier, than where we are now. They didn't seem to realize Buddhism had all these complications as well. Um,
Yes.
and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with the complication per se. What is
Mm.
wrong is when people get uppity about it. That's when it goes wrong.
Yes.
If a group of people think they're not discovering the Buddha nature by being with that group and they want to do it a different way, great. But when things start getting legalistic, that's when the problem starts. So old Catholicism, as I understand it, as I say, I'm with the Old Catholic Apostolic Church, OCAC. We're a blend of liberal Catholics and old Catholics in the sense of the original Dutch signatories. Um, Oddly, with my background, I tend to identify as an old Catholic for two reasons. I am very happy with the sacramental life of Catholicism.
Mhm.
I don't really, want to see that innovated for no reason, and I'd love to see what the reasons are before we start changing things that don't need changing. What's that old, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know,
Right.
I go along that route, and right, so we don't. I mean, old Catholics by definition don't agree with all the theologies of Rome. For us, it's a discussion. As I said to you off air, if I go to Rome, I will be addressed as Father. We are in
Mhm.
at least partial communion with the Romans. Therefore, they've not said, get on your horse and get out of town. What they said was, okay, we wish that wasn't happening, but it has happened. keep talking, keep talking. And I noticed when one of our church groups, one of our streams recently went to Rome a couple of years back now to speak to Pope Francis. His attitude was exactly the same. Look, we're not agreeing on loads of things here, but the point is, let's keep talking. You know, let the Spirit unfold. Let Providence lead us where we need to get to. Um, so I'm rather a proud old Catholic these days. It ties in, believe it or not, politically directly with classical liberalism and libertarianism, as that is understood in Europe. It's quite different to the American model, I think.
I think you're probably right.
And you know, it was a lot of people who were what we would call classical liberals actually changed to old Catholic, excuse me, converted to old Catholicism in Victorian times. Um,
Okay.
and it became quite a serious and recognized movement. So I'm weirdly in the position I'm meant to be in, sort of, but I can still ask all these Unitarian questions. I can still ask all this gay stuff, and people sit down and talk about it with me. So it's a lot of fun because you're dealing with positive people in a positive way because we're all talking about spirit, you know, the Holy Spirit, the angels, and where is it all going? Now, you added some other things. Excuse me. Um, Comparative religion. My first degree, my undergraduate degree, what I did to graduate first time was actually comparative religion. It started, excuse me, as me wanting to find out, okay, what are the problems with religion? Let's get them on the table. I'm that sort of, you know, that's the Celtic side of me coming out. You know, let's
Okay.
get it on the table and see what people are talking about. They're not talking about too much, actually. Most of the obstacles can be easily kicked into touch.
Hmm.
You know, theology, like every other academic discipline, has moved on a lot since the old days. You know, what would have held back people like David Hume, a master philosopher, the Marquis de Sade, let's get saucy and racy. You know, what he would have held up as objections could be knocked down nowadays by a first year undergraduate
Right.
um, because the debates moved on and people have learned more. So I wanted to see initially what the problems were, threw myself into that to a certain extent. I developed a passion in my studies for Hinduism and Buddhism back in those days. I majored in Hinduism, believe it or not. Oh my heavens, there are goddesses with heads, you know, flower heads, and with heaven's sake, they're trippy, surreal, you know, just amazing. Um,
Right.
we used to have, because I went to King's College London for that, we used to have the long suffering Dr. Gupta who came in once a month to deliberately blast us with this new sort of trippy stuff, and it worked every single time. Dr. Gupta, if you're still around, we still love you. Okay. It did make me think that comparative religion isn't quite what it says it is. What are you comparing? Um, is there a Buddha in Christianity? No, there couldn't be because the conceptual frame is different. Can there be a Christ in Buddhism? No, because the conceptual frame is different. It doesn't mean it's all ideology. It doesn't mean it's just ideas in the head. It means there's a different framework, a different series of expectations and formulas and descriptions which people are discussing, and nobody actually is yet comparing in that realistic way. I mean,
Ah,
I agree with the Buddhists. It's not a religion. I agree with them 100%.
right.
That is a philosophy initiated by a very, very, very good man a long time ago. Wow, let's dive in and see what he's got to say. Exciting.
Hmm.
There are types, excuse me, William. There are types of Hinduism which I discovered are directly comparable to the Abrahamic revelation. There are
Okay.
types aren't. I mean, if you're looking at the Krishna religions, sometimes if you're looking at the Shiva religions, sometimes there's nothing more complicated and beautiful than Hinduism. But if you're looking at the concept the Hindus would call Bhagavan, that is a direct theoretical, conceptual analog with what we would mean in Islam, in Judaism, and Christianity by the Godhead. It's exactly the same. So
Okay.
to say that we cannot have a meaningful discussion with them is nonsensical because they are
Right.
talking about the same things we're talking about. The trouble with Hinduism is its vast complexity. People don't get turned on at the right minute. They get turned on by meditation. I practiced meditation for years. Good on you. But that again, it's the beginning of the process. Don't get
Right.
hung up on the beginning. Throw yourself into it. It's exciting. The
Yes.
mysticism, what people are saying, the books, the philosophies. So I would say that to cut a long story short, that if we're looking at comparative religion, religious studies, already Buddhism's off the map. Certain types of Hinduism are comparable. Therefore, what are the other types? Things like Shinto paganism, which I got a personal interest for. So, is that really the animist origin of all of it? Is there really something like a revelation? Just I love deists. Deists. People think that the Enlightenment philosophers were all atheists. They weren't. They were all deists. They
Right.
did believe in something, and they believed in more things than most Church of England vicars do nowadays. Endless ironies. Um, so if we're trying to make sense of religious studies, comparative religion, I think we're at the very beginning of something. We're not at the end of it, and we all got to clarify our terms for the next 50 years or so before it really gets off the ground seriously. Some guy turning up in class and studying African religions when he really wants to be at the bar and going out with his mates to the local club doesn't really. We've made headway in comparative discussions. A lot
Exactly.
of people aren't allowed to do that. Go and do it. Go and do it. But it does mean we've got to be realistic about the state of dialogue between religions. Personally, I do believe. I suppose you could call me an Abrahamist. I do believe in a divine revelation. I think it very clearly begins with the Jews. It is made manifest in Christianity, and it continues into Islam.
Okay.
Um, I've had the great privilege and pleasure, and I do mean that. I was the first chairperson of the Eurasian Creative Guild. I've had a passion for Central Asia. You go past Turkey, but you don't arrive at China. So all of those countries in the middle are Central Asia.
The stands.
Yeah, the stands. I mean, but there are more of them than that. But yeah, the
Yes. The right.
yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
I've been to the mosque folklore. I've been to the mosque where the imams put the genie in the lamp to punish him with the curse of Suleiman, and that Aladdin stole years later, not realizing what he was stealing. I've been to the mosque. These are
Wow.
magical places. Folk tales, folklore gets woven into everyday life, but it's part of the
Mhm.
rich tapestry of a type of Islam which is very unknown here, which is sort of I don't know, sensual, deeply spiritual, beautiful. The people are lovely. And one thing I learned very early on in Central Asian countries is never say you're a minister. Oh, David, can you lead prayers? We're just about to have supper. Can you lead prayers? Oh, David, somebody's feeling depressed. Can you have a chat with them? Never ever say you're a pastor in that part of the world. Your life isn't worth living. The imam drags you in, so God, what's it like being clergy in that part of the world? So that goes on for hours.
Uh-huh.
So it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things. It made me aware, as I say, that there is that transmission amongst Muslims as well.
Yes.
And I think the fact we're looking at slightly different documents, dare I add the word mystery into this? Let's face it, the original documents of the Bible is nothing sacred in this life. Don't answer that, William. They're gone. The original documents of the Quran, whether the Cairo edition editors like it or not, they're all gone.
Right.
Shame on all of us. Is nothing sacred at all. But how do you judge these things if they need judging? By the way people behave, by the conscience that they have, by the spirituality, by the questions they ask, by the bonds of friendship and family. That's how you know. Which leads me, I suppose, to the last part of your question, which isn't directly related. Since I believe in some type of revelation, I would assume that the higher powers aren't entirely idiotic. I'd assume they know roughly what they're doing.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, signs and indications of this are in history. In my particular case, that tended to be an interest in it changed, it developed, it evolved into an interest in anomalous phenomena. UFOs, ghosts, telekinesis, telepathy, all that sort of stuff. As I say, I'm not a believer in UFOs. I'm a knower because I
Right.
saw a UFO as a kid. And you were quoting me a minute ago. Yes, it was clearly a machine. And as I said on that previous show, I would love to say it wasn't a machine. It was a machine, right?
Yeah.
And what interests me now, looking back, I mean, we're all in school. We were in secondary school. And it wasn't the fact the teachers didn't want to discuss it, which I can't get over to this day. This little miracle has just happened and nobody wants to discuss it. So,
That's mind-boggling to me. My
oh,
teachers would have been all over it.
no, I haven't done too badly in education, but I stopped believing in a mainstream
Yeah.
education that day. I'll give you the potted version of what happened. We were all, it was right, tea break, teachers, playtime, morning playtime. We were all out in the, excuse me, all out in it was a country school. Beautiful, cloudless sky, deep blue sky, birds were singing, lovely sunny day, kids playing. And it wasn't me, I can't claim to be the great prophetic figure. It wasn't me that first saw it. Some kid stood next to me and said, "Mark, look up there, it's a UFO." So, where? Because you know what kids are like, they believe nothing.
Right.
I looked up and saw this silvery disc. I can't believe it to this day. Your classic silvery disc, way above us, but observable.
Mhm.
Not a noise came from it. What interests me nowadays is all of the kids in the playground had different reactions. My first reaction was how beautiful. I was obsessed with the sheer beauty of this thing. The kid next to me, not an overachiever, decided to go around the playground saying he'd seen it first. Probably bad at cricket and football as well. The type.
Yeah.
What struck me was some kids run off screaming, "Oh, for God's sake, nothing's happened yet."
Yeah.
Some started fighting. There are always some at a playground. The more robust of us went in to see the teachers to confront them. We got told very sharply, "It's our tea break." And we said, "Look, there's a UFO over the playground. It's our tea break." So, I mean, there's nothing you can do. So we
No.
went out and watched the thing float off. We got back into the classroom, and the first thing that was said was, "We want no talk about UFOs and flying saucers." So that was it, as far as I could say. The teaching profession was written off that day. It wouldn't be now. I mean, there are so many people working hard in it. They're doing their best.
Right.
Wasn't the correct reaction. So for me, I got involved with things like parapsychology, occultism. Parapsychology is just it's a modern way of talking about occultism. Not
Right.
all of which is evil. I mean, the church, the high churches, always encourage what they call natural philosophy. I mean, that's being lost at the moment, which is a shame. I mean, what's disabling the churches at the moment is they not only kicked out the art and the philosophy and the theology. I can't believe the church has an incredible habit of cutting its own head off.
Right.
Every single day, every single 100 years, it does it in a new way. So it's got this unique history in world religions. So the Hindus have the Brahmin caste. We had the Gnostics. So let's kill them. They're asking all these difficult questions. Let's kill them. And it just goes on and on and on. I mean, what the the thing that can't be forgiven is, of course, psychology, and I do mean clinical psychology. Started in the church. It was
It
nothing
did.
unusual to have a priest, one of the priests of a particular parish, to be skilled in these arts in the past,
Okay.
who would be the main spiritual focalizer, the confessor, not necessarily the exorcist, but what we would call counseling nowadays, what we would call psychotherapy, was actually one of the great blessings and ministries of the church. The fact we've all managed to expel that is absolutely beyond belief. Not to say the psychotherapists aren't doing a grand job. They really seriously are. And counselors, I mean, I don't know where we'd all be without their ministry. And I'm going to say that it is a ministry. But
Right.
I mean, the fact it's not in the church is mind-boggling, because it means certain types of inquiry, certain types of spiritual ailment, certain types of spiritual questing are now not being addressed.
Right.
So for me, all of this ended up with an interest in the transcendent, the psychological, and how these higher energies, these higher powers, these beings would manage to make themselves known in human history. I bet I went on far too long with that, William. I do
Oh, it's
apologize.
fascinating. No, it's good. This is meat and potatoes to me.
Right.
This
Yeah.
is the kind of thing I really love hearing about, talking about, and I don't get a chance to. So, yeah, I'm enjoying this.
Thank you.
And, I was thinking of with some of this too, even with the Buddhism, there's one piece with all of these, and I suppose it's not quite the same as looking at comparative religion, but one of the pieces that I think is um, important that a branch of each of these share is the introspective, the search within and connecting with that a universal spiritualism, a universal awareness or consciousness, whatever you want to call it. It's different religions call it different things, but it can take you to that place beyond yourself
Yeah.
and beyond this physical world. And no, it's not fluffy cows with harps, and it's not, then it's a place we can go anytime. But mo- pretty much all of these religions have that aspect to them. Um, Part of my attraction to Catholicism was I'm a Dorothy Day, Thomas Merton type Catholic, social justice and meditation. And he studied Buddhist meditation for years.
Yeah.
Um, the Sufis are an incredible piece of Islam. The people you were talking about, that's a whole different um, form that I know nothing about, and I want to hear more at some time, just one on one.
Yeah.
But I got to be in Rumi's monastery and
Yeah.
see his his coffin surrounded by women. His mother, I think, his sister, different things. There
Yeah.
wasn't this big division of men and women.
Yeah.
And then you look at a lot of early Islamic art, humans were presented,
Yeah.
um, and a lot of it was sensual. And then watching the dervishes at prayer, they took me with them.
Yeah.
Um, I almost tear up talking about it now, and it's been 2.5 years ago. Um, it's just an incredible experience, and I haven't explored all of the religions enough to have that and everything, but I've experienced that in a liturgy well done.
Yeah.
Um, and I've experienced it and just sitting and using maybe a divina type of a meditation more than just the
Yeah.
consciousness. Um, and also your comments about, okay, this is just a piece, the beginning, don't get stuck. It's so exactly right on. Because in my opinion, we're here, scripture talks about becoming perfect like your father is perfect.
Amen.
Well, the form of that, we don't have the verb form. What it means is become whole, complete, and mature. So it's a becoming process that I see as becoming our full, true self, our individual telos. I
Yeah.
can't remember which Greek. I think that was Plato, but it could have been somebody else. Um, and that's part of what the metaphysical. I'm a, a reincarnation person. Um, that's our whole journey, I think, is part of that, and then that gives us our place in the greater whole. And it's an amazing journey.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I do defend organized religion for one simple reason. There's a social component which is very necessary.
Right.
I mean, churches in this part of the world in the old days, most churches close them down if they're not fit for purpose. Close them down. Most of them aren't works of art. Close them down. What a waste of time and energy. Um, they used to be in the old days community centres. They used to be
Yes.
concert halls. They used to be places for rituals, weddings, funerals, christenings. In the old days, churches were awake and alive every single night of the week, and they
Right.
were doing different things. They were community homes. I mean, thinking of the therapeutic side, I mean, I've been involved with people in the past, not so much recently, and that's a shame because I rather enjoy that type of expression of my ministry, but that's something different. There are people who feel so assailed by life as it is at the minute. They can't get out of bed, and they're not being
Right.
lazy. They can't get out of bed. They can't find the motivation or the neuro skills to get from bed to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. It's gone.
Right.
That is the job of the church.
Mhm.
Um, it's not enough for social services. God bless everyone in social services. It's not enough, and they don't have the resources themselves. I mean, heavens above, what we're doing to people in those professions, in those careers, is abominable as well. I mean, that's another discussion.
Right.
It's it behooves the church to get involved, and it behooves the church to take that as a lead. And
Right.
that used to be part of the spiritual guidance that we would offer, and that needs to come back. So I think there are very clear and credible reasons why we do need a religious organization.
Right.
The problem, we both have the same problem with organized religion. The minute it becomes juridical, the minute it becomes judgmental about theology, and we're in charge and you're not, that's where it all goes horribly wrong. I mean,
Exactly.
I had and I the angels love proving points to me. I had that a couple of years ago. I do my best not to get involved with social media arguments. I mean, what a waste of time. But I'm sorry, sometimes I do. And there
Yeah.
was some UFO guy talking absolute rubbish about, if all these UFOs turn up, it's better than religion. And I couldn't put my finger on what he was saying. Why would that be better than religion? And all of a
Right.
sudden, the penny dropped. Oh my God, you don't realize religion is the inner journey. You
Right.
think it's all something to do with bits of metal floating around and all these clever dickies, piloting it around. And I said to him, I mean, you do know, don't you, that the spiritual journey is an inner journey? You do know that. And he completely disappeared from the argument. We're forgetting, externalizing religion is meant to be externalizing your vocation. Are you a
Yes.
teacher? And Paul said, some preach, some teach, some heal. I mean, that guy, it strikes me, a very misunderstood man in all sorts of ways, was struggling with immensely gifted people around him and trying to, right, how do I make sense of all of this? All these people have so many more gifts than me. What do I say to them?
Right.
And he's trying to start listing, go and get on with that. You're a teacher, go and teach. You're a healer, go and heal. I mean, in one sense, being a minister, being a pastor, being a priest is the least of those callings. A priest should be doing his best, her best. We can go into that, to empower the person in question to realize that gift. That's what
Right.
they're there for. Why is a priesthood necessary? Because you're looking at something like a religious coach. Um, I do think, curiously, that it takes someone ordained to perform something like mass. This will get me into hot water. I think when Protestants are performing Holy Communion, remember the theories, the theoretical framework is different. So, and
Yes.
I don't think we should insult them by saying, "Ah, but you're not, you're doing mass improperly." know they're holding a commemorative meal, a communion meal, and that
Right.
is different. Um,
Yes.
so if a Quaker, I mean, in this country, they don't really have elders anymore in that sense. But if a Unitarian pastor wants to hold that type of communion, which I imagine would be very, very sparse, I mean, that is just an act of communion. It's a
Yeah.
remembrance, and that's okay. But even though Scripture does say the priesthood of all believers, I agree with that 100%. Excuse me, because it ties in with what I was saying a minute ago. We're all priests, but we're not all ordained priests.
Yes.
The ordained priest should be the one perfecting, holding the Holy Mass. Don't want to go down the route of transubstantiation, Aristotelian metaphysics. Do they still hold water? Probably not. And what did he have in mind in the first place? I mean, who knows? It was a long time back. So I think that is a designated skill that one needs prayer and meditation and a gift to perform.
Right.
Therefore, I do think those things are necessary. And that's why the two facets of religion for me are still important. Not only the inner journey that leads to the kingdom, that
Hmm.
leads to Christ consciousness, that leads to being where we're meant to be, to the
Hmm.
great day of be with us. Wow, what a pregnant expression that is. But you also need that I'm visiting, my old auntie down the road. She's poorly. She needs her shopping done. Maybe a few prayers just to cheer her up. We need the midweek get together. Everything's against us. We got no money to pay the bills. We just need to pick me up. Let's get together and read some scriptures. It could any sacred scripture. Read some poetry. Have a snack together. I think all those things are important too. My worry about New Age spiritualities isn't that I find it inauthentic. If anything, I find it incredibly potent, perhaps a little too potent for our time. People are so materialistic now that they misunderstand what the New Age is trying to do. I mean, something none of those people they didn't see that coming. They didn't see that as the objection coming along. But we need a bridge between the inner world and the outer world. We need to say, we're a community and we want to bring our spirituality with us. And if that's good for you, okay. And if you don't want us to do that, we don't. We're just bringing sandwiches. We're just bringing some
Right.
company. Come and visit me. I mean, in this country, it's nearly a crime and a sin to get old nowadays, old and poor.
Oh,
But
yeah. Here too.
oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, the Industrial Revolution. Do your job and then die. Which is
Hmm.
basically the attitude still here. I mean, heavens above. That's where the church kicks in. It's not enough, as I say. And my prayers are with everyone I know in social services, and they know I mean that. If anyone watches this, they know I mean that. But it's not the extra bit of oomph that you need with someone who's now worried about bills, even though they own their own home. And they've got no structured week because their job has just gone.
Right.
Everyone around them now is old, and they're struggling because they haven't really investigated religion or spirituality. They're struggling to know what to do. And I don't mean go around and beat them to death with Bibles. I don't mean, now we're going to indoctrinate you. I don't mean that. I mean, sort of, have you thought of these aspects of life? And if not, okay, we're coming anyway. A bit of company. But this is
Right.
really where the church kicks in, and where its ministry, its human ministry, really perfects itself in loving bridges between people. I don't know what you think about all that, William.
I think that makes a lot of good sense, and I know a lot of churches that do that. Not the psychological piece. Psychology isn't part of the seminary curriculum. I mean, there might be a basic course of it, but not
Yeah.
nothing to be a counselor. Um,
But I mean,
we have
it
we
all,
have priests that have gone on and gotten an MSW or something like that,
yeah,
or a PhD in psychiatry or whatever, but that's not part of the main, at least in my area. Other parts of the country, other countries, I don't know.
well, I mean,
Um,
I'm desperate to dive in there just to say one thing. Don't forget, some of the most recent significant psychiatrists have actually been clergy. I think
that
that
doesn't
can't be
surprise
just
me, but I'm
Yeah, I mean that. No, William, it depresses me and it saddens me. I think that's across the board. I don't think it depends on your neck of the woods. I
Yeah,
mean, what are they afraid of? That is the language of the spirit beginning in people.
right.
There's a joke going around with British Freudians that it took God all this time to pick an atheist Jew to bring psychology to the world. Well, actually, that's a clever manoeuvre because they know full well those things were being discussed before Freud. I've got a huge amount of time for Freud,
Mhm.
because he starts the ball rolling. I mean, a very
He does.
clever physician. I mean, people coming back from various conflicts in the Germanic Empire, the Prussian Empire, that period, and the drugs simply weren't working. I mean,
Yes.
so he starts thinking, what on earth do we do? We got to find a way to heal people. I mean, to his detriment, of course, he was struggling so much with theory that he actually didn't heal anybody. And I imagine that one of the big bugbears between him and Carl Jung was that Jung did heal people.
Right.
You get the young upstart coming along saying, yeah, sex, yeah, absolutely vital. Yes, 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 but not everything.
Right.
And that, I mean, that's always held up as the sort of the split, but I think there's more going on there too. And I don't think it's to the detriment of either of them.
Right.
I mean, Freud's initial problem was to be surrounded by a group of geniuses, all of whom developed their own views about what the psyche was doing and what the subconscious was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he should have seen that that's an accolade to what he was doing. I don't think he did, but he should have done.
Mhm.
No, William, it's terribly depressing that you said that. I mean, the one area I sort of noticed that's an overlap is modern exorcism. I'm in two minds. It is a sacrament of the church. It's a sacrament of
Yes,
the
it
church.
is.
But I'm always in two minds about who's doing it and why. And you know, have we really exhausted all the psychological possibilities? Have we really, some of these people are so desperate for spiritual activity. And have we really done that? And
Right.
that's, we're all human, but to do justice to the person who may be a congregant and a patient, to do justice to psychology as well as justice to spirituality, there have to be clear demarcations.
Right.
And I do think there are times when it goes beyond the psychological, and that's when, if people are having trouble, I've heard some horrendous things lately, by the way. Um, that's when you need an exorcist. But it strikes me you need a person of a very sober, very rational, very very healing personality. I mean, I think
Right.
the sort of person that should be an exorcist must be such a rare commodity that it's not surprising that that's not really on most curricula. Most curriculum. I mean, how on earth can you do right now? Right, class. Next week we're all talking about exorcism. I mean, for God, heaven above, it just wouldn't work. But I've heard.
Right.
I mean, but I'm trying to think. Martin Israel in this country, Anglican clergyman, who was a mediumistic, very respected, very well qualified, a very very educated man. Who as far as memory serves me, I mean, he made his reputation around spiritual retreats, which drew upon his expertise. I think he was a pathologist, drew
Okay.
upon his expertise in counseling and psychotherapy as well as spiritual exercises. And there's a Roman Catholic one who fell into. He actually ended up with having an argument with them. Well, it's at the back of my Martin something or other, who my dear friends in the Roman Church, you might be a traditionalist, you might be a liberal. There's a huge amount in common. Can we remember that? It doesn't mean the traditionalists have to be put into a corner. It doesn't mean the liberals have nothing to say. It's a bit more complicated than that. I mean, Martin, God, what was his name? Martin something. It is something like Israel, Martin. I think he had a special dispensation from the Pope himself to it was Martin Israel. Um, to say, right, I think he was a Jesuit, and he was released from certain vows, which of course can be done. It's not true that you're stuck in these positions forever. You know,
Right.
can you actually talk to your superiors as line managers and say, look, I've got this problem. And he was released from certain vows so he could pursue. I mean, a very, very interesting writer as well. Wrote a lot about the paranormal. Wrote a lot about dark energies, uncomfortable subjects. A lot about exorcism. A lot about politics, as far as I know, in America. As it is, I rather like you. I'm a political animal, but I tend to only talk about Britain and Europe. I know Britain and Europe. The minute I'm
Mm,
outside there are too many variables I don't know, so I shut up. But
right.
I think when you've hit such an important point, it's hard to know where to stop. The fact that the church still shies clear of a subject which is clearly a religious subject, it's a disgrace on all of us. I'll shut up, William. I've said my bit. I've said my bit. There we are.
Well, I think no, and what you're saying, it's fascinating, and I agree. Here we do have exorcists. My understanding um is that the church, they really go through quite a very rigorous process to make sure it's not a mental or physical health issue before they even think about exorcism,
Yeah, yeah,
which is good. I give it credit.
yeah,
And with me, I hope I'm not trying to. I sound like I'm bashing organized religion because I'm not. It has a very important place, and I mean, at the beginning, it was helping people understand the world around them when they didn't have science. I mean, it's had an important place on so many levels. It's depending on how it's used.
yeah, yeah,
And you're talking about the ideal situation and the way it works when it works, and you've got the right people in the right places. And I totally agree with it. Unfortunately, we also often have the wrong people in the places, just like any other organization or business, or and even with doctors, you get good doctors, you get bad doctors, you get a therapist, is it a good fit for you or not?
yeah,
They might even be a good therapist but not a good fit for you.
yeah,
um, and so I really don't want to appear like I'm bashing anything. I tend to bash willful ignorance.
yeah,
um, I'm a little bit of a snob about that, and I don't apologize for it. um, I tend to bash too much what I see as fascism or repression.
yeah, yeah.
I've worn out so many shoes on civil rights and stuff, and um, I I don't want to quit that. But also, what you're talking about with the older, part of what I notice is, okay, my vocation, because vocation doesn't isn't just for people with collars, like you said. My life has changed. Things are different. What is the purpose now for getting out of bed?
Yeah.
And um, I'm working on some of that, and it's still developing. But that's one of the issues as people change, and having a community to be part of and belong to um, can really help with that. And I mean, there's so many different ways. Um, Daycare, and have grandparents come and do grandparenty things if they want to. I mean,
Yeah,
there are places, old age homes in Europe that match up with preschools for
yeah,
exactly that kind of thing. And the church can be an important part of that. Just don't teach me tell me who I have to vote for and who I have to hate. Tell me
yeah,
about love, but don't tell me who I have to hate. And what you're talking about is
yeah.
the perfect scenario.
Well, I
Um,
I think there are quite. there are strange distinctions, and I'm speaking way outside my remit, between Christianity as it manifests in America and
Yes.
Christianity as it manifests in Europe.
Yes.
To a certain extent, that's a question of history. We've got so much of it,
Mhm.
and we've made all those mistakes for centuries, and we're just getting sick of making the same mistakes. I think it's as simple as that.
Right.
I America strikes me. The America I love, Yankee Doodle Dandy, dancing down the president's staircase, oh, Hollywood and all those wonderful things and the beatniks and the hippies and all that sort of stuff. America has so much to offer. I find from what I hear, I can't say anything at depth because I don't know. From what I hear of the polarization in America, and I'm only a mere Brit, and what do I know? Particularly in religious terms, and the misinformation, which is surprising,
Yes.
by certain churches about what the Bible says and what it doesn't, which leads me, excuse me, back to earlier. Is nothing sacred? Right. So as far as you see it, you're winning that argument. Is that really what it's about?
Right.
And they seem to have, and I don't want to name names because that's unhelpful. But I mean, they seem to be talking about a savior who would never have said, "Bless those who curse you and love those who hate you."
That's right.
The Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes are central. I mean, that is Christianity, that is the
Right.
gospel. And I hear lots of people in some American churches, I'm not saying we don't hear, but are having trouble dealing with that. But that is Christianity.
We
But
have a lot of churches, including denominational and high churches,
right,
not just evangelical,
right,
non-denominational and such, who tend to fundamentalists who tend to be more conservative, not always, but often,
yeah,
um, that are preaching just the opposite of the
yeah.
Gospels. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I
I,
didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
no, no, you didn't, William. I'm jumping in half to save my throat anyway. I'm beginning to like this ancient idea, and it's not only Hindu, of old souls and younger souls. I love
Mhm.
that idea. I hate that idea. I love that idea. I hate that idea. The sort of enlightenment in me um, wants to talk about nature, and it wants to talk about rationality, and it wants to talk about giving everyone an equal opportunity, and then everything balances out. The more psychological part of me knows that's idealism, and
Mhm.
sadly only that. A lot more is achievable than is being achieved at the minute, but we've got to remember it's idealist. Maybe in a
And
million years, who knows? Never write anything off, but not
right.
as much maybe as we'd hope for now.
But we
Uh,
have to have that vision and
yeah,
that
yeah.
idealism as something to work for, and then
Oh,
be honest about where we are and how do we change that. My master's is public administration
yeah.
with organization development and strategic planning as the main focus. It's like, okay, we're here. How do we get here? And what are the possibilities that are going to happen in this process? And how can we adapt last minute to new things?
Oh,
Um,
100% agree with you. 100%. What interests me, I suppose, is what's the metaphysic behind that?
yes,
Um,
right.
and it's the most unfair idea that human beings have ever come up with, if it's only an idea, that some people maybe have had more lives than others, and they just
Mhm.
know their way around the system a bit more than others. But I find myself, I think that actually originally that's a Platonic idea, but it does make sense. So how how people like all of us, I mean, I imagine the people watching this show will roughly be on the same wavelength we are. So how
Right,
all of us, as the old timers spiritually, actually communicate in a meaningful way.
right.
That it's not wrong to believe those things, and yes, we're fully aware of the reality of the situation. And just saying, yeah, okay, we won't reach everybody, and isn't that terrible? Yes, but we won't. But the argument must keep going, and the argument must always be put forth.
Right.
But somehow the sadness. I mean, the ancient Israelites wouldn't have known what you were talking about with an individual sin. I'm sure you know that. I mean, for them, sin was social, it was cultural. You lived in a
Right.
sinful nation or a sinful city. That's not till Martin Luther. I mean, you wouldn't be a sinful person. The ancient Israelites wouldn't have known what you were talking about. Um, you know, it would sort of, old souls and younger souls, that sort of begins to make sense of all of that. And that's the sin of our culture, sadly, that we pray about and we struggle with and we try and do better about. But there it is, until all
Right.
men are good and just, until all women are good and just. Just a thought. Just a thought.
Well, with my line of work now, as a medium, a teacher, I read, I do between and past life readings. I don't do regressions. I'm not a hypnotist.
Yeah.
I'm finding that there are differences in the maturity of souls amongst those of the past, but including the living. And often it's visible through thoughts and actions, not always. Um, and so I think there is something to it. And to me, I just look at it as just like a human. We start out little and new and have everything to learn. And if things go well, we learn a whole lot and, get to old age and die with more knowledge than we had. And then we come back when we're ready to continue the journey of learning. And um, so it makes sense to me. And I don't see it as a judgment or right or wrong or a better than or worse than. Just like grandma isn't any better or worse than the newborn. Grandma has different a different understanding and experience in the world, and they can pass those to each other. So, and I find I have lots to learn from everybody.
Oh, me too, William. Me too. I mean,
Yeah,
if you stop learning, you haven't become a mature person. You've ceased to become human.
exactly. And life becomes really boring.
Yeah, yeah.
At least for me. Um,
I was on a show a couple of years ago, excuse me, an internet show with the anthroposophist John Barnwell and Roseanne Barr, of all things.
okay,
And she is something of an ardent feminist. I'm sure everybody knows that. What
right,
amazed me was her thinking about the tribal mothers of the past. I mean, and she actually was the first person that introduced, I don't know, the Jewish aspect to this, because I'd heard of that sort of thing amongst Native Americans. Don't forget, for us mere Europeans, that's a magical world elsewhere. We've just heard of it.
right.
We don't know much about it. We've heard of it. But
Mhm.
it was actually the tribal grandmothers that made decisions. And she was saying on one of these shows that that's what the ancient Israel would have been like. It was actually the grandmothers. If there was a real dispute, you're talking at the beginning. You're not talking the various, according to her, the various facets of its history. At one point it would have been official, and the next. I mean, ancient Rome was matriarchal, not officially. I mean, Caesar's wife decided most things, not Caesar. And all the knitting circles of the aristocratic families where the women would meet together. I think what he said in the Senate was terrible. So who's the real power behind all of this? I mean, that's
They
what.
they certainly influence their husbands,
Yeah.
um, for
So
sure.
there were times when it was quasi official. I imagine most of it wasn't. I mean, I didn't get to hear all of it, but
Mhm.
certainly she was saying, the present day notion of the Jewish grandmother is nothing new. The final arbiter of the family. I mean, and it would have been in those early communities, really the gathering of the grandmothers that decided things, de
Okay.
facto. And I
I
thought
had
that's
never heard that before. Um, that's interesting. That. that gives me a, a desire to look into that more deeply.
Yeah, I confess I'm a I'm an egalitarian. Um,
Right.
uh, we need feminism at the moment because an ancient wrong has to be righted, an ancient imbalance needs to find its correct balance. But at the
Yes.
end of the day, I'm not a feminist for one simple reason: there are people called men, and they're not all bad. And what no human society will ever do is try and find balance. Surely the step it was that bloody movie, Barbie. I didn't think it was an era and anti-men at all. I mean, what I saw, apart from a bit of fun,
Uh-huh.
um, was basically Barbie says to Ken at the end, "No, you're Ken. You're Ken. Who is Ken?" And he starts the process of waking up himself. But that's the step towards egalitarianism. I mean,
Right.
there's a dreadful irony in all of this. The more women have been oppressed, the more men haven't been themselves.
That's right.
So, for me, I think we've got to, as you were saying earlier, the policy has to be central and we've got to keep defending the policy. And feminism for me would be one step towards a much more general human balancing.
Yes. And I've from what I've seen of the movement, my own limited participation in it, um, I've been a supporter always. Um,
Always.
and for the most part, I haven't seen it as anti-man. I see individuals who are,
Yeah.
but I know men who are anti-women as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I don't think the male species or our own organizations are anti-women, and I don't think the feminist movement as a whole
Oh, no,
was.
as I say, William,
But
it's righting an ancient wrong. It must
oh,
be there.
yes,
It needs to be there.
yes,
But, it's
right.
not the end goal. It's not the end goal. The end goal is even above that.
You're right. And I'd like to see where we don't need any of these organizations. I'd
Yes.
like to see where we don't need gay rights groups
Yeah.
or Black Lives Matter groups
Yeah.
and I support all these people and all
Yeah.
these groups.
That's right.
I'm not saying I just want to see a time where it's not an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, people are people,
Yeah.
and um, we'll either get there or we'll destruct, in
Oh,
my
no,
opinion.
we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
No one said it was easy, and no one said it was
No,
gonna be an easy ride.
no.
And, I'm gonna have to use a profanity. Do forgive me, William, and everyone listening. I don't often use profanities, but sometimes they're called for. I
Right.
mean, my view of our ancestors are important, but let's face it, they were bastards. They didn't know as much about the world as us, all this alien tech malarkey. Um, they were militaristic, they were oppressive, and all they did was respond to their world in the way that they needed to. I
Right.
mean, it's people that don't see progress. So much progress has been made. Women were property. There's this nonsense going around neo-pagan circles in Britain at the minute. The fearless warrior queen, and all these evil Christians turned up. My God, if it was that simple, it would be easy to correct. And
Right.
I'm not saying there weren't warrior queens. I mean, in Britain particularly,
Well,
but
you
one
had
of the most
Boudica for
famous
one.
leaders, yeah, was Boudica. There's a statue of her outside Parliament, terrifying Julius Caesar for years.
Vivian lives in her hometown.
Yeah. Oh, well, my love to Vivian, as always, my love to Vivian.
Yeah,
So I'm not saying they weren't there, but we've got to be realistic about what the overall framework was. Women were
exactly.
property. Women were property, and that's not good, it's wicked, but that's what the world was like then. In
Yes.
ancient Rome, I mean, were they worried about these sort of neo-romantic statements, tears coming down their armor? No, they were
Mhm.
ruthless military units who glorified in their own martial prowess. They weren't worried. They didn't care if all their enemies dropped dead. They wanted them to drop dead.
That's right.
You've got to be very. not so we're being too hard on ourselves nowadays. So much for the good has happened. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I'm behind all those things as well. You know that. I mean,
Right.
I was one of the early members of the Gay Liberation Front in this country.
Mhm.
Um, right, what you don't see many photos of me because I was at the back praying with everybody instead of the careerists at the front. You learn a
Right.
thing or two. You learn a thing or two. Pushing their way into the BBC cameras. So you do see me sometimes, but not often.
Right.
And, I mean, what were we fighting for in those days? Equality before the law.
Yeah.
We weren't fighting for every type of equality, and I'm always in two minds about the young huskies nowadays that are fighting for that. Not because I don't think they're in the right, because I'm not sure it's achievable.
Right.
Um, please go out and do it. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. And never lose your enthusiasm and never lose your idealism. But there's just some bit at the back of my mind saying, is it too early in human history? Would it really be achievable? I shut up about those things because the young are the young and they've got to power forward. But
Well,
my
and they can help move that date up if it's too early right now, by them coming out and pushing, that can maybe bring that date to when it is right forward. There's
yeah,
gotta be the groundwork and the
yeah.
foundation.
Well, as I say,
And I
they,
give us, our generation, credit for a lot of that. I
yeah.
mean, we're the ones, our generation anyway, were the ones that were first out there throwing bottles and rocks back at the
Yeah,
police
yeah.
instead of just taking the punches.
Oh, well,
And
I was going to just round that off by saying, my view is coloured by my experience on those marches. I mean, it was nothing unusual to be spat in the face and knocked to the ground. That was a
I
part of
bet.
the course.
Mhm,
And what you couldn't do was get up and what you felt like doing
yeah,
was what you absolutely couldn't do. And you
mhm,
just stand up and you smile like nothing's happened. Yeah, God bless you, God bless you. But
mhm,
that's why I suppose I can't give them the full mental assent that I want to because and also things are turning backwards. I don't know what the American situation is. In Europe, people there are so many pressures on ordinary people, financial, psychological, political, that the tide is turning in reverse at the moment. So a lot of things that we thought was settled in our generation, speaking as a Brit, are now slowly edging their way back to the table again.
a
Um,
lot of ours are being actually reversed by the courts, by
Unbelievable,
the Supreme Court, which is,
unbelievable,
you
unbelievable.
know,
Yeah,
um, it's most of us over here that I know are, I'm not scared,
yes,
um, but a lot of people are, and I'm concerned and very pessimistic.
yeah,
Um, I keep looking for little nodules of hope. As long as
yeah,
there's a little beam of light or hope someplace, there's a way to keep going.
yeah, yes.
Um, I know a lot of people that are actively looking to see if there's some way they can leave the country
Wow.
after November if things go. And again,
Oh,
I
yeah,
apologize to everybody. I don't get political usually in the shows, and I'm not going to say too much, but yeah, it's bad here. It's really bad.
yeah,
And um well, for example, I feel safer in Turkey and even in Egypt.
yeah,
Now in Egypt, I was on a tour, we had minders and when needed guards and all
yeah.
that. But and I did have some really interesting pat downs at airport security with interesting looks in the eye from from the guard. Anyway, that's a different story. But I still don't know what it means. But I feel safer in a lot of those countries than I do in much of my own state and in probably at least half of this country
Right.
because of the attitudes and the rollbacks of laws and that kind of
I'm
thing.
very, very sorry to hear that. For
Yeah.
me, my generation Brit, it always looked up to America as the trailblazer.
Mhm.
It was the torch of hope, and things have got complicated, and it's not that America's lost all of that. It certainly has not. But I think its own internal problems, speaking as a mere foreigner, are sort of overwhelming it at the minute.
Yeah.
So it's a time of repose. It's a time of meditation. I'm not surprised what you say about Turkey. I mean, all Turkic cultures are deeply homoerotic. Um, I mean, right. Well, I'm trying to think of how to explain it. I used to do a lot of work with Azerbaijan as
Okay.
well.
Uh-huh.
Very, very fine country. And I mean, you got to remember, all the Central Asians were completely against it. I mean, they all know I was gay. They never, and the Azeris did.
Mhm.
And I was invited because of the collar at one point with a couple of other people from this conference to go to the shrine of the 12 imams, I think it was. Again, folklore, so we went to this place, and the cousin of the stone in the Kaaba was actually housed in this shrine. He was a very fine fellow. We got on great. So you've got
Uh-huh.
this cousin of the stone. Stones have cousins.
Okay.
And the old ladies saw me looking intrigued. And remember, they all know I'm gay. And what was their reaction? They were dragging me to see the other side of the shrine with the stone and pushing candles into my hand because you have to go on your knees and light candles. Well, I felt completely at home.
I know
Um,
you're
you know,
going to the weeping icon or something in
yeah, but
Poland. I
it
climbed the stairs on my knees. Yeah.
yeah, it's directly analogous. I mean, I think our present fear of Islam is really grossly unfounded. And also Islam, it's like saying the church again. I mean, what do you mean? This massive collection of different types of ideology and theology and witness, and even if you look at the two, I mean, in Azerbaijan, I mean, they're basically Shia,
Mhm.
but so in other words, they're more inward looking, much more pro women than Sunni. But again, it depended on the region, and they all disagree because it's all different in different regions. Um, so, yeah, it's a shame that that's become politicized
Mhm.
because now we're looking for enemies in the West to justify our own lack of grit and our lack of problem solving. I mean, there are various
Right.
forces in our cultures that don't want the problems to be solved.
Well, we created most of them.
Yeah, and but I still think there are various interests that don't want them solved, and that's sort of
Oh, I agree with you.
yeah,
I'm not disagreeing.
yeah,
It's just that, I'm just
yeah,
saying that so
yeah.
much of what's going on goes back to how your country and France, to a lesser degree, mine after World War One, and then after World War Two, mine was equally as nefarious in carving places up to control them for their resources.
Yeah, but
I mean,
instead of nation states doing it, now we have corporations doing it. Um,
exactly.
so no, this is human nature more than nationality. Um,
Yes.
and until we have necessary moral debates as Westerners, not only as the West, which is an amorphous concept anyway, not only as the West, but also as nations, which are important. That's
Right.
not really going to go away. I mean, if we look at the great toxicity, the great element, the great poison of Britain has always been the class system, as I was saying earlier. And it's not gone anywhere. My family's owned this part of England, say, for 900 years. Uh, do we still have control over it? Yes, total. And now we're all on the board of directors for such and such an international corporation. I mean, the names haven't even bothered to change.
Right.
Is that how we want to face the future? Is that the sort of future we want to give our right? An irony if a gay man says it in some ways, is that the sort of future we want to leave to the youngsters?
Right.
Personally, I don't. Is that all human beings are capable of achieving? No, it's not. We're all children of God.
Right.
But the conversations uh, they're being discouraged. I mean, they were on. I think they were on the table during the hippie period. I
Right.
think if you look at the beatniks, an intriguing cultural development in America. You have all
Yeah.
these young lads, very very clever young girls. Um, they were scarred by the war, whether they'd been involved directly or not. It had upset everything, all the old certainties. What they said they wanted was just a bit of fun. But take a look at any of those novels, and there's a great depth
Right.
beneath all of that. That simply isn't true.
That's right.
What they really wanted was a revaluation. What are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? And they wanted to start that conversation. I think that conversation nearly got off the ground with the hippies. My trouble with the hippies was the total self-indulgence. I never really saw that in the beatniks.
Right.
And again, I'm speaking about British hippies. So who were the British hippies? The aristocrats,
Yeah.
because they didn't have to worry about a job. They had all the money they needed. They could drop acid and drop out because the butler would make a meal. I mean, I don't know what it was like in America, but it was
It
there's
was
something.
different here. Yeah.
Yeah, upper middle class. I mean, if you were a poor person here, you had a job.
I need to take a very fast break.
Oh,
I'm very sorry, everybody. Um, or David, I don't know. We've been going for an hour and a half.
oh, right.
Do you need to get off and go to bed?
Um, Sadly, yes, because as I say, I'm up on duty tomorrow. So
Right.
I thought we've been talking for about 20 minutes, William.
I know. I did too, but I keep looking
Right.
because I'm trying to be aware.
Yeah.
I'll have you back on the show again,
Thank you.
but I want to set up a time where you and I can just chit chat.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
So,
Yeah.
and I'll send you the links.
Thank you.
Everybody, thank you so much for watching. And David, I just can't thank you enough. This has been a true joy. So,
You're honouring me greatly. I've been, as I say, I don't look forward to these shows much anymore because you go through the same rigmarole. This has been a delight, William. I'm honoured to be getting to know you as a friend.
yes,
This
me
is what
too.
a good old chinwag is all about. This is
Yes,
wonderful. This is
thank
wonderful.
you. Take care, everyone.
Take care, my friends.